Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this latest edition of RE031, where I take old stories that I've done and update them to modern audio standards. And this particular story is called Pack Protection, written by RegalLegalEagle.
This is a terrible idea. I'm telling you that this can't end well. You don't know these creatures. Just wait for the diplomatic service to get some specialists out here.
Natwan snorted as his partner kept trying to get him to not do his job. Their job. He'd never known Tafik to back down from any assignment before. From busting Rigelian drug lords to wrestling Kowloon thugs barehanded. So why was this, of all calls, making him so pathetic? You've got to be kidding me. This isn't even an active shooter, which I know you've always shown up to before. This is child services needing help. How could you possibly turn your back on the children? He asked and glared at his partner, who was already shaking his head.
I'm not. That's what I've been trying to explain to you. You didn't listen to the call. They're trying to arrest a human for illegal adoption. Don't you get what that means?
Netwan frowned as his friend asked him that, and he tried to think it over for a moment. Like they've got illegally adopted children, isn't that straightforward? You read the report. They're mixing herbivore, carnivore, and omnivore species in the same dwelling. That's illegal and unsafe. Plus, they attacked the service worker. This seemed entirely straightforward to him. Why was his partner protesting so heavily?
Yes, but it's a human. They're pack builders. To them, the bonds of family can be intensely strong, and they don't even need to be related to what they consider family. Haven't you heard of the new program pairing them with other species on the force? Every other team is two of the same species, but they build bonds that go past that. I'm telling you, those children are safe, and if you try to take them from their pack leader, nothing good will come of it.
Natwan snorted once more and shook his head. He was done listening to his partner's warning. Enough! We of all species are most responsible for the law we uphold. I will not allow exceptions. I'm going up there, and are you coming with me? He thought at the very least that he could shame Tafik into coming, but to his surprise, his partner shook his head.
I'll go get a med kit from the trunk and wait for you here.
Natwan's eyes widened for a moment, and his partner got out of the speeder to walk around the trunk. Unbelievable, he muttered and got out before looking around the area. They were at the edge of the city, at the base of a hill. There were various plants and crops, it looked like, planted in various rows and designs, heading up the hill. And up to the top, he had to blink twice to make sure that he really was seeing what he thought he was seeing. First of all was the ship. Somehow, someone had landed a ship here on the top of a small hill dozens of kilometers from the spaceport. Second, it looked like something he'd seen in a history text. It looked to be held together with adhesive tape and polysealant. Then there were the creatures around the base packing up what had apparently been a makeshift house, or a series of shacks into a cargo hold of the old ship, while others were harvesting what plants and crops around the area were ready for consumption. Or that's what he assumed. He was a security aid professional, after all, and not a farmer. What surprised him on top of that were the species in question. Just like the call had said, there were carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores all working together to pack up and get the ship ready for leaving, it seemed. When he began to walk up the hill, he heard a loud whistle that sounded like a Tyrillian hawk, but that couldn't be right. Even so, he saw the children ahead of him stop what they were doing and then quickly retreat, either into the ship or around it. That's when he saw the perpetrator step out of the ship. He wasn't overtly familiar with humans, but seeing as the pinkish, freshish creature didn't look like anything else, that's what he figured he was looking at. They were supposed to be mammalian, so he supposed this was a female. She was wearing an old pressure suit that had been patched up, much like the ship, and was the color of rust where the silver patches of adhesive tape weren't holding it together. She was perhaps half a meter shorter than him, but even as he approached, she didn't show any signs of being intimidated and walked out to meet him, setting her hands on her hips as she looked up at him and he down at her.
So which infraction are you here for anyway?
When she said that, Nightwind frowned. Which infraction? You're wanted for more than one? To his surprise, she nodded.
Building a house without a permit, illegal parking, selling produce without a license, operating a spacecraft without registration, something that got a social worker out here, and now you, SAP. She was just using the acronym for his position, but he didn't like the way this female said it. Illegal adoption. He growled and pointed at some of the kids he could see. You've got carnivores and herbivores under the same roof. What not to mention, it looks to be a safety hazard at that. He waved at the ship then. Not the scrap again. Do they look like they're hurting each other? She waved around at the various adopted children, who were quietly watching from around the hilltop. They're family. We're all family, and I'll be damned if I let you take my kids from me. And they don't want to see me be taken away either, do you kids? They let out a resounding chorus of no's, which made Natwan scowl. You have multiple adopted children from far too many species to be safe. You clearly don't have the best interests at heart, he said then, crossing his arms. Best interests? Like those government orphanages do. They lost their parents, and you tried to stuff them all into a cold, hostile, AI-controlled environment like that. They're all here by choice. Kids I have saved and rescued after their parents died. Except for Tiny. She nodded to Calhoun that he thought was an adult until he noticed that she sported a juvenile tusks only. She was a child then, a very big child. Her parents just gave her to me. They thought she was a runt and didn't want to waste time raising her. But the joke's on them. Natwan let out a huff. Look, I'm here to make sure your kids go to a nice, safe orphanage and away from this criminal. So you are going to come along quietly. He couldn't even finish speaking when the woman held her hand out, and he saw a Darashra child jump up onto it, curling into a ball mid-air. As soon as he landed in her hand, she tossed him at Natwan's head. The hard-shelled species slammed into his face, bouncing off as he staggered back, touching his face. Oh, did you just throw a child at me? He asked as he looked at her and began to reach for his service weapon. Sure did. He's a good rock, isn't he? Mainly, I just did it to let Fester get into position. She pointed, and he followed her finger to look down and see the juvenile Snagtath grinning up at him before biting his ankle. Natwan hollered and stopped, going for his weapon as he began to shake his leg to try and get the small carnivore off his ankle. But before he could manage to shake the creature off, he saw the human step aside, and he gasped out. And he gasped as he saw it reveal the charging Hernam. The horned herbivore slammed into his chest, just as the Snagtath let go, and he went tumbling back down the hill, landing in a heap at the bottom. Do you see what I mean? They aren't eating each other, they are working together, Tavik said as he leaned over with the medkit in hand. Shut up! Natwan wheezed and shoved the medkit away as he slowly stood up. She's going to jail, he muttered and began to walk back up the hill with a limp. He drew his weapon before making it up to the top and saw the children had resumed loading up the ship. He aimed his pistol at the human then, and she raised her hands. You are coming with me, he growled. Any objections? Well, you should probably know that you're standing on Casey. He really didn't want to, but he couldn't resist the urge to look down, and he saw a bright smile in the dirt, which made him gasp in surprise as the chemicell dropped her camouflage and inflated, sending his foot up in the air and making him off balance as his arms spun, trying to keep from falling over. But before he could, the glider hawk leapt up from the top of the ship, flying down and slamming into his chest, and sending him screaming and tumbling backwards once more, rolling to the bottom of the hill in a heap yet again. Was all he could manage at first. That was a Kemsil and a glider hawk working together, Natwan. Those two species are mortal enemies from a Deathworld, and that human has them convinced they're family. Just let it go. Never! Natwan growled, and he tried to push himself up, but the Kuan named Tiny was walking down the hill. Hey, Mama says to sit on him until we're ready to go. That okay with you? She asked Tafik, who nodded. Sure, it'll save him some pain, Tafik responded. Traitor, Natwan gasped as the juvenile Kuun sat on him, her large bulk putting him down to the ground easily. She settled in, and her thin tail flopped around lazily as she kept the sap from getting up. She knows how tenacious you folks can be. One of her first was a Lurid, Lattice Callahan. He picked that last name to honor his old human earth cop she taught us about. She had reached up, idly rubbing one of her horns as she spoke, a common trait amongst Kuun juveniles. Really, Lattice?
Didn't he save your life, Natwan? Tafik asked as the other sap let out an annoyed grunt of confirmation. So your mother keeps everyone in check, regardless of diet?
Oh, sure. She's got a beat stick sure for when if someone acts out, but she only uses it when she has to. Plus, she's got Rex to help herd some of the younger ones if needed. We all get along. I'd have never thought I'd ever get over my old family, but when someone chooses you, gives you a new family, and treats you like they're of their blood, well, it's pretty great.
Rex? Who's Rex? Another human? Tafik asked, but Tiny shook her head.
No, he's the earth animal called a dog. Omnivore descendant from some sort of predator. He's really good at herding the herbivores and protecting them too. But we all do that. We work, live, sleep, eat, and fight together. Best family anyone could ever ask for. No matter what the task, we've got a brother or a sister perfect for the job. She nodded at that.
So you don't mind traveling in that? Tafik asked, and he pointed at the ship.
No, don't mind how the ship looks. It'll fly just fine. There are some wheels set up inside so that we can run and help power the minor systems and get exercise too. We'll just head off to another planet and set up again. She's got a knack for finding spots that grow all sorts of stuff well and aren't too far from where we can hunt small game. I sure don't go hungry.
The juvenile snapped her belly for emphasis. Clothes? Tafik asked.
Shoot, half a dozen of us can sew, myself included. Plus we get hand-me-downs from people we sell our produce to. In another month, we would have had a batch of the best glotators on the planet. She waved a hand at the plot lower in the garden. If you water them 3 times a week, you're welcome to them when they're ripe.
Medicine?
Mama's a doc, well, a veterinarian. But it's the same thing to a human, you ask me. They like building packs, don't matter if they're other humans or animals or other sentients.
She shrugged, and Tafik nodded slowly. So it sounds to me like she's got everything covered. You're all well fed and safe and taken care of. Doesn't it sound like that, Natwan? He stressed, and the sap let out a begrudging snort of acceptance once more. Maybe I can talk to the agency, see if they can let you guys stay, Tafik offered.
Nah, thanks. About time we pulled up stakes anyway. Once we get to assaulting the sap, we figure that we've worn out our welcome. We'll be just fine. After all, we're a pack, and we all look after our own.
She nodded at that, and then gave Natwan's side a pat.
If I get off for you promise to leave us alone?
Natwan was quiet for a few seconds before grunting, Yeah, fine. With that, Tiny nodded and got up off the injured Lurid.
Well, you two have a nice day, she said, and began to plod back up the hill.
Natwan just lay on the ground for a while before finally speaking. I guess you were right. I think I could have... He groaned as he slowly started to get up, and Tafik offered up the medkit. Taking the human, but I didn't count on there being a pack.
I told you so, Tafik mentioned, as he got out some bandages and ointment.
Yeah, Natwan muttered, and looked back up the hill at the human and a pack. Her family got finished with loading the ship. How do you fight a mother with so many kids?
You don't,
his partner answered. Natwan just had to nod at that bit of advice. If he ever had to deal with a human and their pack again, he was bringing backup. Lots of it. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.